Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we are making another vest, as you might guess by the title. I showed you in my last vest video that I also had another design in mind that I can insert right here. I really like the high neckline and that it is a more longer vest and more of a trendy piece, so let's do that today. And someone of you asked for the whole pattern making process too, so I think I'm going to film the whole process today too, so you can decide if you want to make the pattern with me while watching. So all you need is a base block and then you can go ahead and make the pattern too. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Kristina, I'm a fashion design student and I do sewing and fashion videos. So let's get to the design process and pattern making. This will be a two-part series, so in this video I will teach you how to do the pattern and the next part will be all about the sewing part. I will also guide you through my alteration process, so I'll show you the first mock-up, then I will show you all the alterations I made for the pattern, and then you can see the final mock-up at the end of the video. Yeah, stay tuned, I hope it's interesting. So let's get started with the pattern making. Okay, my sketch is ready and now I'm going ahead and take my base pattern. I used a book to make the base pattern. I always work with this book and there is also an English version that you can buy. If I find it, I will put a link in the description. First I'm going ahead and I copy the base pattern because this is the base pattern that I will not touch. Keep in mind, if you're doing the same steps like me, place the pattern pieces a little bit apart from each other. Okay, now that I copied everything and I transferred all the lines, I can take away my base block. When constructing a pattern, I always start with the front. What to do first is always the center front. I make sure that I add enough for the overlapping right here. Then I'm starting to choose where the dividing seam will go. So that's what I'm doing first, and I also need to decide where I want the flare to go outwards. Depending how big I want the buttons to be, I already know that I need one in the bust area where the highest bust point is, so that means somewhere right here will be a button. And then I'm able to see how much centimeters as an overlapping is enough. If the button is as big as this one, and I think it's probably about 2 centimeters. Yeah, it's exactly 2 centimeters. So I think I'm going to add 1.5 at the center front. Okay, and at the neckline I need to decide where it needs to sit, so that means I need to mark a position that is further down, so, but not too much because I still want it to be a high neckline. And I think I am going to drop it by 2 centimeters. And I will also mark the 2 centimeters at the shoulder area and just try to make a new line. Next thing I am going to do is that I want to decide where the dividing seam will go. Currently it's going into the shoulder. That's something that I don't want. I want the dividing seam going from the armhole. That means I now need to decide where I want to start, and I think somewhere right here is a good position. That's, let me measure, 5 centimeters above this point at the sleeve, and currently it's going directly to the bust area, and that's something that I want to change too, because looking at the front of the garment it looks nicer when the line is slightly next to the bust point going towards the side seam direction. So that means I am going ahead and change that too, and I think I'm going to do 1.5. then means everything is moved to 1.5. I'm going from this point towards the bust point in a nice curve. Since I moved this bust point, I also need to move the dart right here, 1.5 towards the side seams. That's why I'm drawing a new line from this new bust point going upwards. And the distance is 1.5 from the old line. And I also of course need to change the dot positioning of the other seam right here. That's also 1.5. I'm also going ahead and mark it for you guys in black so you can see it better. Okay, I'm also going to move this dot by 1.5. Okay, so we moved all the darts by 1.5 towards the side seam. But now I also need to decide if I want to make the armhole a bit looser and if I want to change the shoulder width. I think for this project I'm going to keep it kinda wide at 10 centimeters. So I'm going ahead and I measure what I have left on this side. It's 2 centimeters. That means the shoulder at this point needs to be at 8. That's around half a millimeter. I think I'm going ahead with 1 centimeter. Then I'm drawing a new line for the armhole that is moved towards the center front by 1 centimeter. I think I'm going to drop the armhole by 2 centimeters and then I just try to go straight first at this point and then make a curve towards the new curve that we already did draw. Always try to trace back the notches. We already decided that here's a button. Somewhere right here needs to be a button too. That means in the middle of this needs to be a button and I'm using the same distance, approximately around 8.5 to go to this button. And that's how I know that the flare needs to start at this position. So that's the last button and a little bit further down, then it starts to flare out. So I think good height will be right here. And that's in total about 32.5 centimeters, measured from the new neckline downwards. Okay, that means at this position we need to go outwards. So it will go something like this. Okay, next thing I need to think about too is where I want the pocket to be, because I have a welt pocket right here, but it's more of a fake welt pocket. I'll explain that later in the sewing video, but basically it's a dividing seam right at the waistline and then we have the pocket coming from there and going into the side seam. That means I think it's also kind of nice to place it right at the waist seam, and the pocket looks good, maybe in 2.5. And the flared part at the front, I'll do that a bit later, because for now I need to mirror everything that I've done to the front, also to the back. Since I moved, I think it was 2 centimeters, right? I need to take a look. Yeah. Since I moved 2 centimeters down right here, I also need to move 2 centimeters down at the back too. And I need to adapt the neckline too, but I will not go as deep as in the front for the center back. Maybe just around 1 centimeter I think is enough. And then I'm going ahead and connect those lines. Okay, and I also need to change the armhole. I also draw a new line that is around 1 centimeter right here. And we went down 2 centimeters at the side seam, so that's what I'm going to do here now too. And I connect the new armhole line, so it looks something like this. And again, I always try to keep the notches. So we also have in the back the dividing seam. That's what I'm going to do here now too. And I also need to think about if I want to change the dart in the back or if the position is good or not. But I think for the back I'll leave it like it is because I kind of like the distance, that it's a bit smaller at the center of the back. Now I need to think about where I want the seam line to go, but I think here at the marked line I did before is a good position. Or maybe also a bit higher up as we did with the front. Yeah, I'm going 2 centimeters up from this line. And then I'm just drawing a new line towards the seam, towards the dart right here. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot to tell that we will later also cut into the pattern to close the dart that we don't want in the shoulders. That's something that we need to do for this one right here too. So later I'm just going to cut towards the dart point right here, and then I'm twisting it and closing it. But for now I'm just drawing all the lines where I envision them to be. Yeah, for now I can also draw where the 2 straps will go in the back. I think I am placing them a bit above the waistline. Yeah, maybe 1.5 upwards from the waistline in the back. Okay, before we move on to the bottom part of the vest, I'm going ahead and cut into the darts. I am cutting along the new dart line we made. And I stop right before we reach the bust point. And I'm also cutting into the other dart line. Also need to cut open the line of the dividing seam. I'm going ahead and I simply move it to the front piece. And I just tape everything so I have one pattern piece. I'm drawing back on the new shoulder line. I need to do the same for the back, so you're always closing a dart at one turning point, and I need to choose my point since it's right here and I want to close this dart. I need to decide if I just extend this line, because for me it's easier to have the turning point right here and open it up along the new dividing seam we made. That's why I am making the dart longer. That also means this is the new dart, and if we are sewing it as a dart, I have 1 centimeter more in this case that I'm sewing and closing, so it means I'm losing 1 centimeter in this one back piece in the width of the back, and I don't want that, of course. That means I need to add back the 1 centimeters at some point. That's why I also did not choose to make the line too curved at this point. So I think I'm going to add back half a centimeter right here, and the other half is okay if I don't add it back somewhere. Because as long as it's just like half a centimeter, you won't notice during sewing. But in this case I need to add a bit back right here. I'm cutting open these lines so I can close this dart point. And I also need to cut open the new dividing seam at the back. And I'm cutting towards the point we used for opening the dart. And now, as you might notice, I did not cut all the way through, so now I can simply turn the piece towards the back piece. And now I can tape this part right here. Okay, now I can continue with the bottom part of the vest. Since I want this bottom part to be a bit flared, I need to add some volume at the bottom of the vest. That means I need to decide where I need to cut and turn it open so I can add the volume at this point. I decided to work on the front first, And I'm going ahead and I'm cutting the dart, so I have the two front pieces. I did draw on a line right here, just from the dart continuing downwards. And now I'm cutting it open. Make sure that you mark your notches before, that's important, otherwise you won't know how to sew it back on. Okay, that's how it looks right now. Now it's time to think about how the bottom line should curve or go outward. So I like that the front piece right here is a bit further down than the side seam, so that means I'm already thinking about the hemline. Now I'm deciding based on the side seam how I want the curve to be. I'm starting by going up at the side seam by 2 centimeters. Then I'm drawing a line towards this point. And keep in mind to keep this closed for a second. Something like this. And I also need to make the line rectangular at the side seam, add a more straighter line, and I try to go towards this line a bit curved. Okay, now that we have our guideline for our hem, we need to add some volume at the bottom of the waist. And I'm doing that by marking where I want to cut towards the pattern piece, and I will also cut the waistline open in a second. I'm using the hemline as a guideline. I'm going to add 2 lines in the side piece of the front. I'm drawing it then the hemline towards the waistline, and I try to go for thirds, so that means I'm dividing this in thirds, and also the hip line. I think at the waistline you can eyeball it, and right here I am measuring about 15 centimeters. That means at 5 we need to add those lines. What I am doing next is that I am already adding a bit to the side seam too, because I also want more volume right here. And I think I am going outwards by a centimeter. And I'm drawing a new seam line right here. And I'm making a straight line because we will add volume right here anyways, so this part here of the hip curve doesn't matter as much since we add volume at this point too. Okay, now I'm cutting this open. I'm quickly going ahead and add notches. I'm using some of the leftover paper to add it to this pattern piece right here, because I also need to add the same amount right here, 1 centimeter. And I'm drawing on the new line. I'm cutting them out so you can see it a bit better what I've done so far. I'm going ahead and add some volume by making sure that I'm still connected at the side seam and the dividing seam at this point. And then I'm adding volume as much as I like at this area right here. And I know from experience that I don't need too much at this point. I turned it open by 1.5. And I'm also going to secure that with a tape. And now I can cut a more clean curve. And that's what you're going to do for the back too. The back will look something like this. I'm cutting the straight line of the waistline. Okay, because I will add a pocket right here in this area. Okay, this is done. Now I still need to figure out how I want this part to be at the front piece. Make another line, so I'm using half of the remaining hemline right here, and I'm going towards the middle, this waistline. I'm making a straight line and I'm going to cut open at this point and into this line. And before I do that, I make sure to add notches so I know where the pattern pieces need to go. And now I'm going to do basically the same thing as before. I am making sure that I am matching right here at this point, and I am going down at this point, and then I'm adding width to it, but not too much in this case. It's about 2 centimeters at this point. When choosing the volume for this part right here, I am always taking a look at the whole pattern piece to the side if it's kind of looking like my drawing, because in my drawing this part right here was a bit wider than what I had before, and now it seems to look like the drawing. So this is the new hemline, and I am also making sure that this line is more straight and does not make some weird curves right here. I can cut this one out too. Okay, now that the front and the side front is done, we can move on to the back. We are basically doing the same steps as before. We need to add 1 centimeter to the side seam. And I'm just drawing a line from the waistline downwards. And I'm also ignoring this part right here because we add that in the volume we are doing now. We are again dividing this at the waistline into 3 sections and also in the hemline. Oh, and before I do that, I also need to go up by 2 centimeters right here. And I am drawing a curved line towards the center back. Now I can also turn the side back piece into thirds at this hemline too. Okay, and I need to cut it open at this line, and also at the waistline to add some volume like we did before. And I'm also cutting open this thirds right here. I am securing that one too. And now I can take my 3 pieces and start to make the volume at the hemline. And I'm making sure that at the hemline I'll add 1.5 like we did for the front. Okay, and we still need to add something right here too before I forget this part. And I'm adding 1 centimeter. Side back is done. We are leaving it like this. And for the back we just need to add something at the hemline too. But I'm not adding any volume to this part right here. That means I only added, I think about 5 millimeters or something to the hemline. I just used the dot line. With that, we are actually ready to make our first prototype. And I will just use this cheap metal cloth to make the first one. Okay guys, I closed the front. Now I'm generally taking you through the steps that I am doing with my first mock-up. First, I am always having my drawing right next to me, so I can take a look at the reference and just see all the differences that I notice with the mock-up that I made and the drawing. And first thing I'm always going to do is to check if the proportions are right. So that means if the neckline is at the height that I want and if the length of the piece is also good, or if it needs to be shorter or longer. So one thing I noticed is that on the reference it's a bit longer at the hemline. Not much, but tiny bit. If you might notice, it's a little bit loose right here, and it's not because that I have too much fabric on right here, it's because actually we have too much width right here. And you can also tell if you look into the sides, it's a bit too loose at this point, so that means that I need to fold it and alter that in the pattern. And what I'm going to do is that I just lay it flat and pin it in place, and that's the amount that I need to alter in the pattern. I also used a base block that is not true to my size, it's just a size 38. I also have one in my size, so I wasn't sure if I use this one or if I do it in a 38, but next time I'm going to use my base block. Okay, I pinned that on both sides, and now the neckline looks better. But one thing I also noticed is that the neckline on the reference is a bit higher, and that's something that I want to change too. Not that much, it's just, I would say 1.5 centimeters higher. I did not add any seam allowance to the neckline, the armhole or the hemline, because for the first mock-up I want to see if the length is already good or not, so I just don't add any seam allowance. I think it would bother me, especially in the center back, that it's too high. And I'm just simply going to hold my finger right where you can feel the bone of your neck right here, and I'm going to mark it. So that means from this center back point up to the front I will alter the neckline, and then I will connect those pieces, but I will show you the process on the pattern in a second. Next thing you can already tell is that it's too tight at the bust area, and there's one more thing. Maybe you also noticed that the curve is not looking quite right. That's because my bust point is lower than the bust point of the pattern we used. That means I need to lower this part too, so it fits my bust point. So it means I also need to mark where my bust point will be, and I think something around here is good. And I will also make it looser. I'm going to add some width to the side seams and to the dividing seam in the front. And also one thing I noticed is that I added some width to the front piece at the hemline right here too, but it naturally folds toward the side front. That means I will try to also flatten this piece right here, otherwise it will always create some random folds right here. And I'm also just trying to lay it flat, how it wants to move. And once I think that's the amount that it needs, I'm just going ahead and pin it. I actually like the volume at the hem already, so I'm going to leave the rest as it is. And I also think that the positioning of the straps are good, but they need to be longer. They are a bit too short, so it's not looking that nice when it's tied. Yeah, so that's something that I need to change too. Okay, and because I am doing all those changes, I will do a second mock-up just to be sure that everything fits. So sometimes I'm not even doing a second mock-up, but in this case I do so just so I can check if the bust area will sit, because that's the most important part for me. It needs to sit good in this area, otherwise it will always look either too tight or too loose. So I'm going ahead and do a second mock-up. And most likely after the second mock-up, if there are any changes left, they're most likely not that tragic, so I can just go ahead and do all the alterations on the pattern, and then I'm not going to do a third mock-up. I only do a third mock-up if it's way too off from the sketch, but I think it's manageable to do all the alterations, and with the second mock-up it should be fine. And I sometimes get asked what I am doing with all those mock-ups that I make. If you study fashion design, you probably know this, and I used to do a lot of mock-ups. That's just part of my studies. And I also most likely keep all the mock-ups until I can create another one with it. That's how I always used to do it back in my bachelor's. If I go for a corset that has really small pattern pieces, I can easily use my mock-up like this one and put the new pattern pieces inside this mock-up and just cut it out. That's how I do it, and that's how I reuse it. That's just one way of using old mock-ups. I just noticed while talking that there is still this weird width that I could also take away in the pattern. Maybe I do so anyways. It's not that much, but it will change how the neckline sits. So that's something that I'm going to show you too. And I think it's fine for now. So let's go ahead and do all the changes together. I think first I am going to add the width at the bust area, and from there on I will make all the other changes. That was our previous bust point, and that's the new bust point. And now I can simply measure the distance between those points, and that's about 3.5, but I will use the 3 centimeters. So that means looking at the front pieces, I need to draw on a straight line from the bust point area, and it needs to be parallel to our waistline and bust line. That's that. The same thing I need to do for the front piece. If you're doing it for the front, you also need to do it for the back pieces. But one important thing is the back looked good on the mock-up, so that means I actually don't need the width in the back. If I would open it up right here and leave the back side piece, they won't match up anymore in the side seam. So that means I need to alter this piece too. And that's why I am also drawing on the line on the back sides. I just used the side seams and placed them next to each other and mark where the line should continue in the back piece. And I also need to draw on the line right here. And for this part I'm trying to match the notches that I have right here at the bust line. And now try to keep those lines parallel too. And I'm going to draw on the line on the back too. So that's the line we need to cut open. Now that we opened that up, we can add the 3 centimeters to the front that we need. And as a next step, I am drawing 3 centimeters downwards from the line right here. And now I place the bottom part to the new line we just drew on. And for this part I try to keep the line of the side seam. It should match up in the side seam but also in the front, and that looks good so far. Okay, and that means the bottom line is the new bust point line. That also means that the highest point in the side front should be this point right here. I try to connect those pieces now. At the same time we wanted to add a little bit of width right here too. That's why I am adding about 0.5 centimeters to the bust point and draw it on right here and move it down. And same for the other side. Okay, now that we did that, we can also check how much we need to take away at this part right here. Taking a look at where those points meet, I just draw on a notch, just like that. And then I'm drawing on where the fold is. Okay, so when I open it up again, you can see that that's the amount that is too much at this area. And now I can simply draw the line right here and measure how much it is from the marked point to the other point. And that's about 2.7, but I go for 2.5. And we need to take away the 2.5 in the side, front and front. So that means we need to divide the 2.5 by 2, 1.25. We need to take away in this area right here. We need to match it up with the bust point line. And remember to use the new one we created, not the old one. And try to make a nice bust curve. And honestly, it's all about eyeballing it and just hoping that it looks good. Okay, that means that is our new line right here. I'm also adding a few millimeters right here under the armhole, not that much. And I try to connect it with the old side seam. Okay, I can cut that out for now, and then we need to check if we need to alter the armhole, which we need to do. And as you can tell, if we lay them next to each other and if we put the notches together, you can see that something is missing right here. Of course, if you take that much away, the armhole is not looking good anymore. That means we need to draw on a new armhole. And since the shoulder point was good and the underarm point too, I need to connect it here again at this area. Now I'm placing the notches next to each other, and now I'm trying to make a new armhole by going from this shoulder point downwards. And I'm trying to connect it with the side seam underarm point. I think this curve looks good. Now I also need to draw on the new line right here. Okay, now I need to cut away this piece and add this amount right here. That's done. Next I'm going to check if there is something else that I can alter to the front pieces, and I think it was here in the neckline that we need to alter to. And you can just draw a line from this point towards the dividing seam. It doesn't matter that much where it is, it's just important that you can close this part in a second. And I'm going to cut towards this point, but not through the pattern piece. Then we need to close it like this. That also changed the neckline of the front, but that's okay because we still need to add on 1.5 centimeters around this area right here too. 1.5. And then I'm connecting the shoulder seam with the new neckline. I draw back on the center front. All the alterations for this piece are done now, and we can continue with the side front piece because we still need to change the part at the hemline. I just mark where the fold should be, and I also mark fold itself. Now I'm going to open it. And now I can simply measure how much I need to take away. But I'm going to take it away only in this side front piece, not in the front. And that's about 1.5 centimeters. So that means I'm measuring 1.5 from this point, or from this point to this right here. Now that we lowered the bust point, of course the whole piece is longer now, and that also means that the pocket positioning is more facing downwards. So that's why I also need to change the pocket positioning. Mark the 3 centimeters from the waist upwards. And I'm going to cut that open, and I just attach it to the bottom part. Fitting. And I'm also keeping this shape right here. So the side front piece is done too. Now that we added 3 centimeters to the side front, we need to do the same for the back. But as I mentioned before, I liked how the back was. So that means I don't want the whole 3 centimeters up to the center back. Of course, I need the 3 centimeters right here, but now I'm trying to close it towards the dividing seam. But I'm going to do that for the whole back. So I'm trying to come up with a new line that looks good. And the easiest way to do that is to place the side back and the back piece next to each other, but make sure to keep a bit of a distance right here. Now that I know that I need 3 centimeters for the side seam, I just draw a line right here. Okay, you know what? I changed my mind actually, because now that I'm looking at the side front, of course I need the 3 centimeters right here, but it's not that necessary to have it right here. That's why I am trying now to close it towards the side seam in the front. That means I am cutting the line open once again. And I already marked 1.5 centimeters at the side seam in the side front piece. And now I'm trying to keep this positioning right here, and I'm just matching it up at the side seam. And now we can try to make it more fitting right here. And I think I'm going to do it like that. And you know what? Pattern making is all about trial and error. Of course, I don't know if this actually works. But it's a good thing if you're doing it yourself. You can always alter it, and with every pattern you're doing and with every pattern you're altering, you will get better. So it's just important to keep going and to try to make new patterns if you're interested in making your own patterns. But of course I can also understand if that is too much work for you. I sometimes wonder myself how much work it actually is. Sometimes you're underestimated, but that's also the part that I love about pattern making. Okay, now I am measuring how much distance we have right here, and it's 0.5, and I will mark that for the back piece too. And now I can connect the back piece again by matching this point and coming towards this new point. Okay, and then I'm going to cut everything out. And of course, looking at the back piece right here, we are almost done, but before I forget it, we need to change the neckline at the back too. And since I didn't have any seam allowance at the neck, I can simply measure how much I need to go down, and it's 2.5. Then I am going to draw towards the shoulder part right here. And I think I'm going to take away this part too. Yeah, that's about 4 millimeters, and I'm going ahead and do that for the front too, at this area right here. I'm not sure anymore if I also wanted to add width to the side seam, but I am going ahead and add a little bit. I can always take it back if I need to. And I'm going for 5 millimeters, and same for this side. Okay, we are done with the pattern pieces. It always looks this messy. But that's okay for now. I'm going ahead and sew the second mock-up, and if everything fits, the next step would be to digitalize this anyway, so I'll see you in a second. Okay guys, I am back with the second mock-up. As you can see, it looks so much better. I added some seam allowance this time to the neckline, armhole and so on, because I thought if this sits quite nicely, I will also go ahead and do the facing too. It's still tight but totally fine. I still have some space right here. First point is at the right position. It looks good from the sides as well as from the front. The only thing, it's still making a curve here. It's going more inwards. What you could do if you have the same issue is to go from the bust point and draw a new dividing seam right here and draw it so it looks straight when you're looking from the front. Did draw on a line right here, a dotted line, maybe you can see. I just wanted to show you the curve at the front, that's why it makes this weird thing right here, because this point is further to the side and here it goes more towards the front, and that's exactly why it does this weird curve when looking at the front. So I'm going ahead and cut from this bust point at the side front piece and use the amount that I drew on the mock-up and cut it away right here, and I just tape it to this piece so the line is looking cleaner in the finished result. But that's fine, I will do the changes on the pattern and then it should be okay. Other than that, I kinda like it so far. So I will be back in a second. Okay, I am back with the second mock-up. I did all the facings now and I also changed a bit the seam line of the dividing seam in the front. That's how it looks like now and I really love it so far. I love that it's going more towards the side at this part right here. It looks kind of like a peplum top, but it isn't, so it looks very cute. And the pockets are in, the facings are in here too. That's how the back looks like, and I also like the height of the neckline right here. The only thing that I am going to do is that I still need to get rid of a little amount right here. It's not that much, but I want the neckline to sit closely to my body. If I don't do that, it will always gap a little bit right here. It's not that much, it's better than before, but still there are just few millimeters that I need to take away from the pattern, but I will not show it anymore. It's basically the same step as I showed you before. Otherwise, I think it's cute. I also pinned where the buttons will be. I added one more button compared to my drawings, so it will close a bit nicer. So that's the whole process of making this vest. I showed you all the steps. I hope this was helpful. The next part will be the sewing part, so I will do a 2-part series. But that's the basic construction of this vest. And yeah, of course, if that was way too much for you, I'm going to grade the pattern, digitalize it and everything. So you're also able to get the pattern if you want to. But again, I will show it in the next video. Guys, and I also wanted to mention that I have my very first pattern ready on Etsy. It was the pattern for the first vest I showed you. That's this one. It's a more loose fitted vest. It's not that tight because it's supposed to be a layering piece, but you can also go ahead and watch this video for this vest right here. And I promise the next video after the sewing video is not going to be a vest anymore, so I can also do other stuff than vests. But yeah, I just simply wanted to make one and wanted to continue my capsule wardrobe series, and all the vests that I wanted to do are done after the sewing video, and then we can continue with other patterns. Stay tuned for the next part. I hope we will see each other for the sewing video, and other than that, I'm wishing you a nice day. Bye!